Queen Victoria looks a little bit familiar. Let me tell you about that. Welcome to the Time Treadmill. I'm Ron, and these are my sweaty thoughts about Doctor Who. Actress Pauline Collins first appeared on Doctor Who way back in the Second Doctor era in one of my favorite of his stories, The Faceless Ones, which, like I said at the time when I watched it a while back, it's a real shame that it's a completely missing story, although it's been fairly recently reconstructed through animation, and I thought they did a fairly good job with it. Faceless Ones was one of my biggest surprises on my first time watching through all of Doctor Who. It was a story that I'd never even really heard much about, and it was just fantastic. One of the key characters in the story was a young woman who was actually slated to become the new ongoing companion. Ben and Polly were leaving with this story. In fact, they disappear for the vast majority of the Faceless Ones. And Jamie McCrimmon is paired up with a young woman who was searching for her missing brother. That young woman was played by Pauline Collins. She wound up declining the offer to become a regular companion, and that's how we wound up with Victoria shortly thereafter. But Pauline Collins then went off and had an entire long and productive acting career and was, in 2005, invited back to Doctor Who to play the role of Queen Victoria, for which she is spectacularly good. At the time, she became the actor with the longest gap between appearances on the show, with something like 37, 38 years, something like that. I'd have to go back and do the math. But that record was subsequently broken by a small number of other actors, the most notable being Isan Churchman, but I'll get to her in a couple of months. Anyway, back to Queen Victoria. Tooth and Claw is set in the Victorian era of the United Kingdom in 1879 in the Scottish Highlands. It's noteworthy as being the only story in which David Tennant actually got to use his natural accent. Him being Scottish, his birth name is David MacDonald. He had to change it because when he began acting, there was already another David MacDonald in the acting union, and two people can't share the same name. So he actually borrowed the name Tennant from one of the Pet Shop Boys. In any case, he actually gets to speak in a Scottish brogue for major parts of this episode, and it's just a delight to see him doing that. It wasn't quite as impressive at the time because I really didn't know who he was, but it was clearly a lot of fun for him. More significantly, this story ends with Queen Victoria founding the Torchwood Institute. And so this story lays the foundation for the upcoming Torchwood TV series and for other events later in this season. The Torchwood Institute is going to come very strongly into play by the end of this season. And for all of that, I had forgotten how enjoyable this story really is. It's kind of a middling story in the grand scheme of things of New Who, but it's better than I remembered. And even the CGI effects of the werewolf are actually really pretty good, certainly better than some of the CGI coming up in future episodes. And it's noteworthy to realize that although the Mill did the special effects for this, as they did for most of the rest of the series, they actually hired out for a specialist in CGI fur in order to animate the werewolf itself. And so that makes the story the only one I'm aware of that actually has a guest star special effects artist. But the work holds up well. Even in 2021 eyes, the CGI looks pretty dang good, and it's spectacularly good for 2005 era television CGI. So all of that was well and good. I thoroughly enjoyed the story, but tomorrow is the big one. Tomorrow is the return of Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane Smith, and I might just cry a little bit. So I'll see you tomorrow.